Today really honored to introduce our speaker, an academic from Munich University. Dr. Werner Berger will share his thoughts based on his lifelong study of Qing coins and numismatic documents. The Hong Kong University Museum has just published his life's work, covering all Qing Dynasty cash coins as well as Qing monetary policies. The speaker's research on coins allowed him to revisit and prove wrong some of the official communist narrative of China's history in the last 19th and 20th century. Chinese numismatic is not taught at any university in the Far East, nor anywhere around the world. But it's taught in the US. In fact, 10 universities teach this subject, but only in Greek, Roman, and European numismatics. Dr. Berger hopes the Hong Kong University could acquire his extensive cash collection, which apparently he has stocked at home, and his exactly an extensive specialized library as well, so that they can possibly introduce Chinese numismatics as a subject. I join his bafflement as to why this subject isn't covered at any major university in Asia. For anyone who'd like to read further about the topic, Dr. Berger's book titled Qing Cash is available for sale here today at a discounted price for members and guests. That book over there encapsulates 50 years of your research, is that right? So it's his whole body of work. Let's hear what he has to say. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Dr. Berger.
Well, how China lost a century. China had the worst start imaginable into the modern age. In the 19th century, China was economically bankrupt, administrative incompetent, and suffered militarily one defeat after another. In the First and the Second Opium War, the Xinjiang and the Yunnan Muslim uprisings, the Sino-Japanese War, the Boxer Rebellion when Peking was occupied by the Allied armies, the unequal treaties and the establishment of treaty ports and colonies were actually positive, but by introducing China to modern city planning and transportation systems, although at the time that was not perceived by China as anything positive. That is all not disputed, and China tried ever since to shake off this stigma. But what were the real reasons that the proud and prosperous 18th century China turned into a rundown 19th century failed state? I wanted to understand what were the real reasons for this deterioration of a whole country. I found that imperialism, colonialism, Western economic exploitation, opium, and the drain of some silver had absolutely nothing to do with it. Whatever history books published after 1949 claim. Quite a number of Western authors have repeated this cliché, although a number of sinologists like Fairbank and Franking and so on corrected this view long ago. The traditional monetary system of the Chinese consisted of unminted silver in the forms of ingots of 1 to 50 tael, and a minted square-holed brass coin, 1,000 of which were worth a tael of silver. Coins are a very good mirror of the economic situation of any country throughout history, and also in this case of the 19th century China. The official Chinese records tell us only of what should have happened and not what really happened. I was searching at every address of Qing studies for official mint reports, but to no avail. After trying for over 20 years, the first historical archives of China in Peking granted me access to hitherto unpublished secret mint reports. The study of these 2,838 official Chinese numismatic documents not only revealed what really happened to the economy, but yielded also precise monetary supply figures for the 1730s onward. The official exchange rate was always 1,000 cash coins for 1 tael of silver. In the 18th century, it was always slightly below the 1,000 mark. A soldier, for example, got a monthly salary of 1.5 to 2 tael per month, but he was paid in cash according to the official exchange rate. That means he got every month a 10 to 15% bonus. Emperor Qianlong cast during most of his 60-year reign around 16 to 18 new cash per year per every Chinese. That was the secret of Qianlong's success in enlarging his empire by 2 new territories, namely Xinjiang and Tibet. In the 1780s, an enormous amount of debased cash flooded the markets, mainly from Annam. The Annamese, and later Vietnamese, rulers leased the mines to the local Chinese, who in return had to cast all proper Vietnamese coins. What they cast in addition was of no concern to the Vietnamese. They cast mountains of small coins with a variety of Chinese reign titles. Then they went with them shopping to Canton. They bought porcelain, soy sauce, vinegar, and so on, all items they could sell with a good profit back home. In 1848, a Mr. Morrison reported, although of no greater value than about the 12th part of a cent, this money is nevertheless much adulterated by forgers and depreciated by the government. Inferior descriptions of it are also imported in considerable quantities, particularly from Cochin, China, where tutenage is almost the only ingredient used in its composition. The exchange rate dropped to 1,200. When the Qianlong Emperor heard about that, he immediately acted. He ordered every yamen, every government office to buy up all forgeries at scrap metal prices. They paid 60 good cash for 1 catty of forgeries. The so collected metal was so huge that even large provinces like Sichuan and Yunnan could cast all their coins from it for many, many years. Way over 1 billion coins. And as expected, the exchange rate fell back to 900. By 1820, however, it was back to 1,200. It was time to buy up the forgeries again. But Jiaqing, as well as later Daoguang, were too weak to push through what their father or grandfather did when he was already 80. By 1830, the exchange rate surpassed the 1,500 and soon reached 2,000. During the 18th century, the East India Company monopolized the import of tea. The trade was enormous. Until 1809, they paid the Chinese annually 766,000 pounds. That is 39 million tael of silver, or 1,455 metric ton of silver every year. The sales tax on tea was 119%. And it is not surprising that in 1773, a tea party was organized in Boston, and then they bought their tea from Dutch smugglers. At the same time, they spread the word to drink patriotic coffee and not imperialistic tea. The Commutation Act reduced the tax to 12.5% in 1784. But by that time, America had already cut its ties with Britain and its East India Company. Napoleon's invasion of Spain cut off the supply of Spanish pieces of 8. The British had to find something else to sell them. For about half of the required amount, they managed to sell them English wool, music boxes, Flintstones, and so on. But for the other half, there was only opium. By 1826, the trade became for the first time negative for China. And the British took with them that year 1.5 million tael of silver. This surprisingly small amount of silver export genuinely upset the Chinese, who were spoiled by continuously large profits. Even the emperor got his share of 855,000 tael annually. One slogan at the time was repeated by everybody: silver is expensive, cash is cheap. Naturally, every Chinese blamed the English for an exchange rate of close to 2,500 for one tael, because they took a few chests of silver out of the country. Chinese emperors had always admonished their subjects not to waste anything and to lead a frugal life. But Tao Guang went to extreme. He wore patched up clothes, halted the production of Tibetan silver coins, and so on. When a copper shortage was discovered, the production and sale of copper items of over 5 catties was forbidden, instead of encouraging the mining of copper. All 5 Manchu emperors of the 19th century, plus the infamous Chushi, were simply incompetent to see a problem, recognize it as such, and do anything about it. In 1836, an official wrote in a memorial that the foreigners took away previously tea and silk for their opium. But now they take away annually 10 million tael of silver for their opium. Even the emperor was of the opinion that if something becomes expensive, it must have become scarce. Out of this misconception, he sent 1839 Commissioner Lin to Canton. The story of the first Opium War has been retold so many times that I do not have to repeat it here. But why did nobody take care of the root of the evil and weed out the forgeries? Because nearly every official benefited from the situation. Taxes had to be paid in silver, and the officials got silver to pay the soldiers, Yamen clerks, and so on. Their salary was in silver, but they received only cash at the official rate of 1,000 to 1. The officials had now only to change half of their received silver into cash coins and could pocket the other half. So why change anything? The consequences of this colossal, nationwide fraud were disastrous and tragic. With great regularity, an uprising, a local rebellion, or a sectarian war occurred every decade. Most were defeated before they became a movement, threatening peace and the economy. The Taiping uprising at the initial stages could have been likewise defeated. But the Chinese soldier had gone soft, as foreign observers described it. The soldiers simply didn't want to fight if they got only half and less than half of their usual pay. The Taiping Rebellion became the bloodiest Chinese conflict of the 19th century, costing way over 30 million lives. The emperor at the time, Xianfeng, tried every trick his board of revenue could think of to raise money to finance the war. Cash coins of multiple values, coins made from iron and paper money and silver, and cash denominations. Everything worked fine at the beginning. But when the people found out that all these systems were only a one-way street, they became valueless. A worker, for example, got paid with large coins of 100 and 500 cash. But when he wanted to pay his taxes with it, they were not accepted. Only silver was acceptable. In 1854, the harvest in North China was exceptionally good. But the people in Peking were starving. Farmers were paid with iron cash, which was completely valueless outside Peking. And they simply did not bring any food anymore into the city. In desperation, the Chinese asked an Englishman for help, the Chinese Gordon, who paid his soldiers honest money. And so the spook ended in 1864. By that time, the Chinese economy was in ruin. And through these disastrous money manipulations, the government had lost the last bit of trust it might still have had. On top of it, no Yunnan copper could reach the Peking mints, even after the defeat of the Taiping, when the way was open again. Peking still got no copper because the Yunnan Muslim revolted. In Xinjiang, another bloody fight was raging. First a revolt by Rashidin Khan and then by Yaqub Bek, who was defeated only in 1877. The outflow of silver had absolutely no influence on the exchange rate. Until 1856, China lost 276 tael of silver. But from 1856 until 1886, 498 million tael flowed back into China, with no reaction from the exchange rate. Only the quality of the cash coins was responsible for the exchange rate and nothing else. An exchange rate of over 2,000 per tael meant that no mint wanted to cast any coins because it was a money-losing business, in spite of constant urging by Peking to resume casting. The reason was simple. The mint metals, copper and zinc, had to be paid in silver. For the same amount of silver, you could get more than double the amount of coins than you could cast for that price. Previously, during Qianlong's reign, the governors got their cash coins from the individual mints at the official rate. But now they exchanged their silver at the open market because of the handsome profit. In some provinces, in Shanxi, for example, whole villages exchanged silver against several ox carts full of new cash, what they got at the official exchange rate. And they recast them into the double number of forgeries, a quick 50% profit. The secret mint reports reveal the exact figures of the real situation. In 1863, only one new cash were cast per person per year. In 1874, only 1/3 of a cash. Now, let's compare that to the 14 to 18 cash during Qianlong's time, a century earlier. What a difference to Japan. During the Tokugawa period, Japan had gold, silver coinage in several denominations, cash coins, paper money, the famous hansatsu, which circulated parallel with each other with fixed exchange rates. Japan was under strict control by the shoguns, who enforced discipline throughout. Japan was a closed country with foreign travel restrictions in either direction, and with only one tightly controlled port city, namely Nagasaki. In 1868, Emperor Meiji introduced the Japanese yen, followed 1871 by a gold-silver standard with convertible banknotes for everyday use. Japan did not waste any time by nationwide corruption, and so found its place in the modern world with relative little problem. In China, the first machine-made cash coins were only in 1889 put into circulation, and even then they were met with more opposition than acceptance. The struck 10 cash copper coin, now without a square hole, was issued only in 1900. Too little, too late. Without a functioning currency system, Chinese economy was in a worse shape than in the last decades of the Ming Dynasty. Under these conditions, all attempts of economic reform and progress were bound to fail. China had no chance to catch up with the rest of the world, and so lost a whole century through corruption and greedy officials. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for a very interesting speech and for touching a subject that most of us probably are not that knowledgeable about. Do you see any parallels with what happened in China with what's happening in other parts of the world in the recent century?
Yes. It is more or less the same system. The same thing can happen in quite a number of countries. What comes to mind right now are African countries. After they got independent, they did the same tricks. Their money, although, let's say, the international French franc was depreciated, and so the same thing happened. And look at the state some African countries are in at the moment.
Zimbabwe comes to mind.
What do you have any measures of inflation over this time period?
Well, inflation, to calculate it in the same way as we calculate inflation now, I have not done it. But the exchange rate of the silver, which was more or less stable, was, well, before 1,000 and now 2,000, now 2,500. So inflation is 100%, 150%. In percentages, that's approximately.
We often hear, for example, that the Bundesbank today is very committed to strong money because of the lessons of the hyperinflation of the 20s. Do you think that there's any similar lessons that still reside in Chinese policymakers now?
Well, it is very difficult to compare the fiat money at the moment of the day to the actual intrinsic value money of copper or silver and gold. It's very difficult. But the tendency is the same, to devalue and reaping the profit. But at the moment, the devaluation is not to enrich a certain group of people. It is to keep the economy going again. But that's a difference. I think we cannot compare it to the same thing.
You'll often hear certain conspiracy theorists these days suggesting that China today is amassing gold with an intention to eventually declare a renminbi backed by gold. Do you have any opinion on that particular topic? Thank you.
I do not know how best to answer to compare it with today's policies. It is somehow it does not really fit, because the basics are different. What is the means of payment in today's society, in today's economy, in, let's say, China, in Hong Kong, are on a different basis than they were in 19th century China. Therefore, I don't think we can directly compare it to that.
Okay, if, as you said, the currency depreciated from Qianlong's times at 900 cash for each tile of silver to 2,500 about 100 years later, then actually the annualized inflation rate is not high. I mean, most currencies nowadays, in a normalized inflation environment of about 2% inflation, we would sort of have a halving of the value of a currency every 25 to 30 years. So here, the currency lost 150% of its value over 100 years. It doesn't look really that dramatic to me. It's one thing. The second thing is a question, is there reliable information about government budgets in those days, whether they were in surplus or whether they were in deficit?
Well, I know what you're talking about. But for example, just one example, in the beginning of the Qing dynasty, Sun Shi time, compared to the end of Qianlong period, the prices have risen, but very little. And they increased at the same rate as the inflow of silver, the increased production of coins justified the price increases. But then the money itself was depreciated, was cut. A coin of late 19th century was only 1.1, 1.2 gram against 4.4 gram, what it should be in the official weight. And that was, nobody wanted to have these lousy coins. I can give you plenty examples of really people complaining about it and describing it in vivid details. And it has nothing to do with, say, modern oil prices decreasing, increased by so and so many percent in so and so many years. That is a different story. Because when they had gold currency in America, for example, the prices increased so little, and nobody complained about that. After they abolished the gold, then the price increases ballooned.
The debasement of currencies is very similar to experiences we've seen in Latin America, where you've seen, for example, in Argentina, the end of the peso, the creation of various parallel currencies.
Yes.
The problem in China sounds quite similar. The problem in Argentina was a poor government, poor administration, effectively a bankrupt fiscal policy. Is that effectively what you're telling us?
Yes, I agree. That is that's a real good example of pretty much the same story.
Any more questions? Oh.
Hi, me again. Could you talk a little bit more about what they should have done differently? Exactly what steps they could have taken in terms of copper production or stamping out the forgeries?
Okay. What they should have done the same thing what Chen Lung did. The moment he noticed that the coins are not anymore the coins, and the exchange rate is no more 900 or a little bit below 1,000, and went to 1,200 and so on. He immediately went about to buy up all forgeries. And every Chinese knew what is a forgery. That was not a problem. So, buy it up. And it was actually even a money spending way to do it. Because the 60 cash he paid, he used about only 45 cash to make it. So he had a little profit. And that should have been done every 20 years until those forgeries stopped coming from Vietnam. And they came in shiploads full. Shiploads full. And they took shiploads full of porcelain and all the goods for China, what they could buy in Canton, and took it back to what is today Saigon. And Saigon lived off this kind of China trade, they called it. That is what they should have done. It worked once, and it would have worked continuously. And pay the soldiers not enough money. Soldiers that do not want to fight if they don't get any payment anymore. They couldn't support their wife and children anymore, so why should they fight? So, that is what they should have done.
The first is, what do you think of digital currencies like Bitcoin?
What do you think of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin? Have you heard of Bitcoin? Have you heard of Bitcoin?
Bitcoin.
Yes. No, he hasn't. Sorry.
Yes, I have heard.
Oh, you have.
Okay.
Okay.
And I've never seen one.
You have never seen one.
Most people haven't. And the second part of my question is, based on your experience, do you believe that we should go back to a gold standard as the only way to really establish the value of currency in the long term?
Actually, with the end of the Qing dynasty, my book stops. My studies also ended, and what followed then is something different, something very different.
Oh, and he asked about gold. Should we go back to the gold standard as a way of meeting the true value of money?
gold standard was not good for China because China had no gold. So China couldn't go to a gold standard. And
Wait
it
a
was
minute.
recognized as such, and everybody stuck with the silver
Well,
with China. So Hong Kong government only invoiced in silver and accepted silver. And the accounts of the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation had gold, but only now and then a few gold coins from America. The big thing was silver. And when in the 1930s, the whole rest of the world went off the silver standard, China went on the silver standard and struck in the 1930s silver dollars, and everybody was happy. Only the Japanese spoiled the party by invading China in 1937. So that was that end. Otherwise, China had a good start in the 1930s.
Any more questions?
Yeah.
Oh, right at the front.
My name's Angus Forsyth, an independent member. But now China, in fact, is the largest gold producer in
I
the
was
world,
gonna say that
and has
as
been
well.
and has
When
been
you-
for some 20 years. So presumably they can be well afforded to have a gold standard, and everybody else just
Yeah.
run with it.
Yeah, at that time, yes. But at that time, China had no gold. 1870, the Rome Conference and all this, there was no way Japan tried to get on a gold standard, but China has no way. But Japan did very funny things. It melted down priceless screens because they contain 2% gold in order to back up the gold standard.
It just
They
didn't
all
work.
tried to compete with America.
Any more questions? About the, because you mentioned that the subject of coins just is not embraced anywhere in Asia. Can you just talk about your views on that? Because I find that quite odd, that it's
Yeah.
not taught, since coins are
Well,
a
I don't
real
know why, but
barometer for the economy.
numismatics is not taught in any Far Eastern university. I don't know why. Although it is a common subject in America, 10 universities, and Europe, and all those who teach numismatics have a good collection of coins as a basis. Harvard University, for example, is a very good collection of European coins, Renaissance coins. And on that basis, they can teach you numismatics, and Harvard numismatists are quite good, very famous. And Europe, London, Paris, Munich, and so on and so on, they all teach it as a auxiliary subject for archaeology, for history, for economical history in particular. But why not in the Far East? Well, there is no where is a good collection as a backup for teaching numismatics. There is none.
Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you so much, Dr. Berger, for an insightful talk. And here's a token of our appreciation. Thank you, Dr. Berger.